Can you just tell us the 4 pillars of NLP?
Any concept or any practice basically has a certain foundation. So in the case of NLP, there are 4 pillars of NLP, and then it's like a pyramid, and there's other concepts that flow kind of under each one of those pillars. As I said first, NLP is all about facilitating an outcome. So the first pillar is outcome facilitation. You talk to somebody for a particular purpose. Either it's to resolve a conflict, or it's to build a rapport, or it's to build a relationship. So that's the outcome facilitation. So that's the first pillar of NLP. The other pillar of NLP is actually observation, and they call it sensory activity. So the whole idea behind that is we have sensory perceptions. So what are sensory perceptions? It's sight, sound, smell, taste. So there's a lot of things you can achieve by observing what the other person is doing, how he's trying to communicate, what is his mood, what are the circumstances. So that's one of the things that you need to keep in mind when you're communicating with somebody. To give you a very simple example, you want something from your parents. If you go and ask them for what you want at an inappropriate time, the answer that you're going to get is no.
Yeah.
So you need to approach them at a time when they're conducive to giving you the response that you want. So how do you achieve that? By observing their mood, observing their frame of mind. So there are some conversations you'll bring up at a dinner table. There are some conversations you'll bring up early in the morning. There are other conversations that you'll go out for a coffee. So my eldest son was doing econometrics and statistics, and I was living in the UK, and when I came back, he says, "Bhai, let's go for a coffee." I knew that something was afoot. And over that coffee, he conveys to me and says that, "Hey, listen, you know what? I don't want to study anymore." He sensed my mood. He said, "Let's go out for a coffee." So he took me into an environment where I would be more conducive to listen to him, as opposed to bringing it on the dinner table when there'd be a whole bunch of other people around. So that is basically him observing very carefully what was the mood of his father when he started to have this conversation with him. So that's just one example of how you would apply that. The other one is flexibility in behavior. So you see whether the person is going to be very rigid, and that then goes back to things like what are his beliefs, what is he after, how is he going to react. So these are the things that you'll keep in mind. So that's basically the third pillar. The fourth pillar, which is fundamentally important, is building rapport. So if I want to have a conversation with you and we are at counter purposes, the conversation is not going to go well. So what do? I try to veer the conversation in a direction where we are both in a frame of mind, or we are in a zone where we're going to be able to communicate with each other. So these are the 4 fundamental pillars of Neuro Linguistic Programming.
So, in an article you had mentioned the power of observation. Can you explain more about it?
There's different types of ways you observe. So what are the things that we normally observe about people? So I'll ask you a question. So you meet somebody for the first time. What are the things you observe?
As a person, I always observe their dressing sense.
Yes, absolutely.
The way they greet themselves.
Yes. What does the dress sense tell you?
About the personality.
I'll drill down further. So if a person is dressed with a suit, or is dressed casually, person is dressed in clothes that are not ironed, they are wrinkled, what do these things tell you? What are the possible things that you would think of?
The person whose dress is wrinkled, 100% is a messy guy who has...
That's possible. That's a habit.
Yeah.
That's a trait, that's a habit. But if you go beyond that, it may lead you to other conclusions. So why has he not ironed his clothes? He was in a rush. He's stressed. He couldn't be bothered about his appearance. So each one of them leads you to think that why is this? Or he's just a casual person like me. Like, I don't give a damn. I'll wear shorts and t-shirts and go to a wedding. But that's people who know me. People who don't know me will say that, this guy is shabby, like you said. This guy doesn't care about how he looks. There's other people who convey and they turn around and say that, hey, this guy, has got some problem. What typically happens when you see a person who's got dark circles under his eyes? What is the impression that you gather?
He works late, he
1,
sleeps less.
2, more. Why do your eyes get dark? Why do you lose sleep? Either you've got habits that keep you up late, or you have stress. You've got something playing on your mind that stops you from sleeping. So you go beyond the apparent. So the power of observation is very important. It's a telltale sign as to what exactly is going on in that person's mind. So what happens when you use that power of observation, you're able to drill down and ask gentle questions that allow you to understand what the other person's frame of mind is. So that's as far as the physical appearance is concerned. Then there is also verbal. How does the person speak to you? Is he speaking in a voice that's loud, that's forceful? That implies confidence. Is he speaking in a very weak voice? Is he got a very shallow voice? Is he breathing heavily? So each one of these things actually makes you think about why that person. Either he's got a very mild and meek voice, or the person is stressed, or the person is not confident. Or these give you a kind of a window to what possibly that person is going through. So that's the reason why the power of observation is very, very important when you're using NLP. It gives you an insight into what the person may or may not be going through. But you can't jump to a conclusion. Your job as an NLP practitioner is to drill down and find out why. So you use all of these possibilities and then you ask one question after the other.
So we understood the power of observation.
Mhm.
And now, how do you say people should use it in the day-to-day life? Can you just give us a few hints, like how should use NLP?
The examples I've been giving you is more about dealing with other people. But even more important is actually how NLP helps you. So NLP is a great tool for self-analysis. It enables you to step back and observe how you're behaving. For example, sometimes you get very angry. Sometimes you're depressed. Instead of just accepting the state of mind we are in, if you use NLP techniques, you can use all of these techniques in such a manner that you can self-analyze yourself with a view to change the way you are, change the way you're feeling, or to change your approach to fixing a problem. So you use it primarily to help yourself. And by helping, if you learn to help yourself, you will be in a much better position to deal with other people. Because it's very easy to find fault and analyze other people, but it's more difficult to self-analyze. But if you are a self-analyzed person or you can analyze yourself well, then it becomes so much easier for you to analyze somebody else. So I think NLP, the power of NLP is first understanding yourself, then understanding other people.
Is there any common phrases that we use in our day-to-day life to implicate NLP?
There are positives and there are negatives in things we do and things we say. I tell anybody and everybody I meet, there are certain words that we almost never use. If, then, else, but, could, would, and should.
All the future tenses.
Not future, it's all iffy. If you do this, I'll do this. If he does this, she'll do this. If you do this, then I will do this. Everything is conditional. It's not absolute. So if you eradicate these words from your vocabulary as far as possible, sometimes it's you need to use it. But if you eradicate these words from your vocabulary, conversations become a lot more definite and positive. So that's one of the things that you need to learn to inculcate within yourself.
And what are the NLP techniques?
So there are many NLP techniques. The ultimate technique is something known as mirroring. That's a stage that comes pretty late. Basically showing that person the mirror. Try many different techniques, and when you realize that the person is now ready to face himself or herself, you show them the mirror. This is how you're actually behaving. We used this one technique in a previous organization where I worked, where there was this guy who used to work for us, and he had this very, very heavy accent from a certain part of India, and I don't want to say which. As an experiment, what we did is we asked him to record himself. The funny part is he realized that even though he was speaking in this heavy Indian, colloquial, vernacular kind of an accent, he was trying to throw in an American accent in the middle of it, and it was sounding extremely, extremely put on and weird. So when we helped him to record that and play it back, that's a mirroring technique. That's one of the techniques that works very well. But you need to gently bring that person to a phase where he's able to look at himself and say that this is what I truly look like in front of other people. Because when we are speaking, we don't know what we look like. So this is a way to show the person the mirror to say, hey, look, this is who you really are. Not all people are ready to accept that. So it's layer by layer. But the first step is basically what you do is, if somebody comes to you with a problem, or if you're facing a problem, you reframe that equation. Because very often, what we do is we jump to conclusions without analyzing what the situation really is. So the first thing you do is you reframe. If there's a question which starts, let's say, or there's a negative, change that around and put it in such a manner that's neutral. So you'll say, what if? Have you thought about this? Have you looked at it from this perspective? So that's the process of what we call is reframing in such a manner, a little bit more acceptable to the person.
Sentiment analysis?
So before that, so the other NLP technique is something known as anchoring. Very often when you're stressed out, what happens? You go scattergun. Your thoughts are in a million places at the same time. Your job as an NLP practitioner, if you're trying to help somebody, is to now root that person and say, please don't go all over the place. Identify the root cause of what's going on, and that process is known as anchoring. So we talked about mirroring, we talked about anchoring, we talked about reframing. The other one is rapport. So the first thing you do is you build rapport. What you do is you try to get on the same page as that person. You will try to adopt mannerisms that the person has so he becomes a little bit more familiar with you. Because if you're somebody who's very contradictory or very opposed to that person, he's going to have a resistance barrier in dealing with you. So you try to establish some kind of a common ground, which is basically building a rapport with that person. Because only when you build rapport with a person is when he's going to open up and speak to you. Pacing. Very often people work in fits and starts. They'll start, they'll stop because they're second guessing themselves, they're second guessing you, they're second guessing a situation. Pacing is nothing but a technique that you use to help the person gradually progress down the path to arrive at a conclusion. And something even more powerful than pacing is leading. People are lost, people are floundering, they don't know where to turn. As a mentor, as a person who's using NLP, either with yourself or with somebody else, so one of the things that you will do is you will gently lead that person to a conclusion. The conclusion is not to solve the problem because only you can solve your own problems. In fact, that should be your effort rather than prescribing to somebody that this is how you should fix it. So what you do is you pace the person, you lead the person to a certain conclusion that makes him think, oh yeah, this is what I think is going wrong. And you gently nudge him in that direction. So that's the process known as leading. So it's a step-by-step process. Then comes the most difficult part before the mirroring. Person has got a certain set of beliefs, fundamental beliefs, something that is very close to them, and they hang on to that for dear life even though it's not serving them. So what you're going to do as an NLP practitioner is to now remodel the beliefs. And the way to do that is not, you're full of shit, you're talking crap. That's not going to work. Why? Because now you've built rapport, you've established common ground, you've led him, you've paced him, and now you're in a fundamentally strong position to try to remodel how that person is thinking by making him change his frame of mind. Because if you frame the question properly, the answers will follow through. And once you've remodeled the beliefs and the perceptions, very often we perceive a problem, but it's not actually a problem. It's in our mind that we've created the problem. Actually, it's not a problem with anybody else. How often does it happen amongst friends that we jump to a conclusion and say, oh, this person doesn't like me or that person doesn't like me, when actually that's not the fact. It's just a perception that you have formed in your mind.
It's our thinking.
It's your thinking. It's your belief. It's a figment of your imagination without you taking the trouble to validate whether it's true or not. So that's the process of remodeling and reframing it in such a manner that that person is now able to think for himself. And the last stage is, like I said, show them the mirror. Listen, I've gone through this process. I've enabled you. This is what you really look like.
You just mentioned about making the question. Is NLP also used in answering also?
Absolutely. So answering in one way, but not giving an answer in a manner where they just accept what you're saying and abandon their own thought processes. What you're trying to do is educate a person and build him up to think for himself. So if a person asks you a question, you can give him your opinion based on your observation of that person. This is how you come across. That person may not be that way, but he comes across in a certain manner. So if you're able to guide that person, is when you say these things, this is what you appear like. That is something. So you're not answering the question, you're enabling them to answer the question, giving them a few pointers.
In your article also you had mentioned about sentimental analysis.
What are the sentiments we typically have? Just name a few sentiments out of the top of your head. Hate, love, affection. Sentiments are what? They are triggers.
Yeah.
They're triggered by something. If somebody speaks very sweetly to you, if somebody speaks in a harsh manner to you, oh, my boss hates me because he's spoken very hard. But now, when you're analyzing that sentiment, why have I been screamed at by my boss? Either he's in a bad mood, sentiment. I've done something wrong. So I'm able to now identify what are the sentiments that are being driven by certain actions that either the other person is taking or we are taking. So that's sentiment analysis.